morning, everyone, and welcome into Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason, and we've got some football to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about some news, and then we're going to go into 5 players that are mispriced, whether they be overvalued or undervalued. So you're going to have to stick around to find out what I mean for those 5 players. But go ahead, take out your coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And of course, welcome into the chat, everyone tuning in, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or listening on the podcast. Thank you so much. Good morning to you, Mark. Good morning to you, to the house. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let's go ahead and get rocking and rolling. We'll start. I've got one news story for you guys today. Full disclaimer, little disclosure, if you will. The next 2 episodes this week, given the 4th of July holiday, will be pre-recorded. Really good guests lined up. We're having Dario Austin tomorrow for some firework projections, if you will. And then on Friday, we'll be having the mad scientist himself, Aaron St. Dennis. So wanted to go ahead and break down a little bit of news as going to technically be out of office the next 2 days. So Josh Jacobs, there's some hype building around him, and it actually comes from an interview. Josh Jacobs himself really kind of hyping himself up in his usage this season on the Green Bay Packers. He went on NFL Network yesterday or 2 days ago and had a little conversation with Mike Garofalo and Tom Pelissero. These are some of the highlights. Basically, he said, honestly, I think the sky is the limit in this offense. Obviously, with having a special guy in Jordan Love, and having a good offensive line and some good receivers out there makes it a lot easier for me. But just being able to see the game plans and things that they want to do with me this year, the things that they're allowing me to do, I just think it's going to be a special year. Just to be able to come out and actually show that I can catch the ball more. Not just that, but trusting me enough to be able to pick up protections. It's just so special when you got a guy like Jordan Love back there, and you can't really just load the box every play, and you make defenses decide what they want to stop. I think that's going to be the biggest help for me this year. I can honestly say that as I'm getting older and I'm playing longer, I have a real goal of legacy. I think that's a big thing, wanting to play in important games, play in the playoffs, make a deep run, and, play in that game if we get there. That's big for me. I think that's the most important thing. So, of course, there are a few takeaways here. Of course, Josh Jacobs is hyping himself up, and the usage that the Green Bay Packers are expected to give him based on what he's learning so far from our OTAs, from voluntary minicamps, and all of that stuff. So Josh Jacobs has seen the game plan, has seen the playbook, and sees that a lot of plays are designed for him to not only be a featured runner, but also to catch the ball out of the backfield, and that is something really, really special that we have to get excited about, really. We know Josh Jacobs right now is expected really to go off this year. We know that, of course, they did draft Marshawn Lloyd, who is a player that I really like, but I also know that it's probably going to take some time for him to at least get to the level of a Josh Jacobs. We have him right now as the RB17 on our seasonal rankings, projected for 236 points, which is a lot of points, but it might need to even be moved up, as it doesn't seem like he is very much projected for a lot of pass catching when you look at that. In fact, valued right around Kenneth Walker and Aaron Jones. So I think Josh Jacobs could very well be in for another season like what we saw in 2022. The Green Bay Packers went out and signed him to a big contract, even if it is arguably only a 1-year contract based on how you look at it. It still could be the full 3 years if he plays really, really well. And we saw over 2,000 yards from him in 2022. We saw 53 receptions. We saw 400 receiving yards. And even last year, we saw an 11-target, 8-reception game from Josh Jacobs. He's more than just a between-the-tackles grinder. He really is a running back that can do it all and be a true bell cow in this league. We've seen it, and I fully expect him to be good again on such an electric offense in Green Bay. Of course, I'm still taking Marshawn Lloyd in Dynasty, but it is really Josh Jacobs' season. I really expect big things from him. I actually did a trade we'll talk about later in the show, some mispriced fantasy football values. I actually did a trade for Tyreek. I traded away Tyreek Hill in my Dynasty League for Josh Jacobs and some extra cherries on top, of course. I mean, well, not just Josh Jacobs, but that was a pivot I wanted to make because I viewed, Tyreek Hill as a win now wide receiver. I view Josh Jacobs as a win now running back. And I wanted some extra pieces on my team. I like Josh Jacobs a lot this season. Very excited to see what he can bring to Green Bay. Yes, I still want Marshawn Lloyd in Dynasty. Yes, I probably still want Marshawn Lloyd in Redraft as well, just in case an injury happens. But I really do believe that Josh Jacobs will be a 3-down back for Green Bay. I'm sure Marshawn Lloyd will come in for some spells here and there and be really explosive. But Josh Jacobs is definitely the back to own, and without question, even. He's in. He really is primed for a huge season. With it being arguably only a 1-year contract, let me pull up the full details so you guys know exactly what I'm talking about here. But basically, there's an out on his contract. Let me get the full details here. It was a 4-year, $48 million contract with 12 of it guaranteed. But yes, there's a out after this season to where they could get out from under it pretty easily. In fact, most of this contract that he signed was backloaded. It's only a base salary of $1 million this year, $1 million next year. And then in 2026 and 2027, those base salaries go up to $10 and $12 million. So really, this is kind of a prove it deal when you look at it, which is very interesting given Josh Jacobs has proven it. But, he's still only 26 years old, even if he does have some tread on his tire. And even last year looked pretty good prior to his injury. So Josh Jacobs is a player I want, especially in redraft, but I also see the case for trading for him in Dynasty if you're a win now team. So Josh Jacobs, prime to catch a lot of passes in 2024. Draft him while you can at his, let's see, go to the ADP tab on Underdog. RB12 value, 5th round right now in Underdog. That is not too shabby for a player like Josh Jacobs. So that is where we're at on that subject. Before we get into my 5 mispriced players, why don't I go ahead and play a little bit of an ad break for our Dynasty Deluxe.
This episode is brought to you by PlayerProfiler, the Dynasty Deluxe package. The rankings are the best in the industry. It includes strategy mode where you can say, hey, change the rankings to be win now. Oh, change the rankings to be productive struggle. There's also a draft planner to help strategize where you should take players because the draft planner also includes ADP. There's a trade finder where we look up on My Fantasy League and we see trades that are done, including a particular player. Then there's a trade analyzer where you can plug in draft picks, players, and we assign a lifetime value to draft picks out 5 years. The best thing about our trade analyzer, it can't be gamed with volume. And there's mock draft data to see right now what's the market for player X versus player Y, including in the fall when very few mock drafts are happening. And our Dynasty Guide, the Dynasty Dominator, would cost you $10 on Amazon, but you get it for free with Dynasty Deluxe, and you get our rookie guide for free, a $25 value. So you get all of that for $45. I mean, it's a great deal.
It really, really is a great deal. Go get that Dynasty Deluxe package. And if you want even more, go ahead and just get the full all-in package. You can use promo code JASON and get $20 off of it. That'll give you the Dynasty Deluxe. That'll give you the data analysis. That'll give you the player rankings. It'll give you all the wonderful player profiler tools to help you win your league. So, guys, I've got 5 mispriced fantasy football players for you. Are they underpriced? Are they overpriced? What do I mean? Well, we'll go player by player. The first one I want to talk about, as teased with the Josh Jacobs trade I mentioned, is Tyreek Hill. And this is a dynasty take. Some of these values will vary between dynasty, redraft, and all that stuff. But Tyreek Hill right now, I've talked about it a few times on the show. I've talked about it on Trade Gods. But right now, Tyreek Hill is the dynasty wide receiver 12 on Keep Trade Cut. And I get it. Last year, Tyreek Hill was on pace for 2,000 receiving yards, right? He finished the year with 1,800 receiving yards, 13 receiving touchdowns, averaged 23.5 points per game, which was second in the league. Really, really a dominant season from him. But he is only getting older. He is now 30 years old officially, 30.3. And when you look at his peers, I just don't understand the valuation here. Because you can get essentially 5 win-now receivers for this one win-now receiver in Tyreek Hill. And I understand that his ceiling is insane. But so is the ceilings for some of these other players. When I talk about Tyreek Hill being the dynasty wide receiver 12, why is Devontae Adams the dynasty wide receiver 35? Why is Cooper Kupp the dynasty wide receiver 37? Why is Stephon Diggs the dynasty wide receiver 42? Why is Mike Evans the dynasty wide receiver 33? And most importantly, why is DeAndre Hopkins the wide receiver 65? All of these coming from keep, trade, cut. You can take Tyreek Hill right now, not only offload him for his younger counterpart, Jalen Waddle, very, very easily, but you could get a Davante Adams with a massive cherry on top. You could get a Cooper Kupp with a massive cherry on top. You could get a Stephon Diggs, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins, all of these old elite wide receivers that have just as high of a ceiling as Tyreek Hill, maybe slightly less. Like maybe their ceiling isn't 2,000, maybe their ceiling's 1,800 yards, right? These are some elite, like Hall of Fame wide receivers, and they're a third to a fifth to a sixth of the price when it comes to DeAndre Hopkins, right? So I just do not understand Tyreek Hill's dynasty valuation right now. I really don't. Even as a win now team, I understand why you would be going for him. But then I would just ask myself, well, actually, if I'm a win now team, why am I paying up for a Tyreek Hill when I could pay down for a Cooper Kupp? I could pay down for a DeAndre Hopkins, a Stephon Diggs, and Mike Evans, a Davante Adams, any of those older wide receivers with just a very similar ceiling with a very successful potential 2024. I know Tyreek Hill has the ceiling. I know we've seen some great seasons from him, especially last year. I mean, we're talking about back-to-back 1,700 yards from this player, back-to-back seasons with 20 or more points per game. But at some point, something has to give. Age catches up to every single player in the league. And so I would rather take the very risky, high-valued asset in Tyreek Hill and, move some of that risk to another risky old wide receiver with a high win now wide receiver and see what youth or other type of package I can get on top. I don't really think you're going to be missing too much at the end of the day in terms of a week-to-week point scoring in-season basis. I know it's tough to do, but we're nearing the end of his contract. They're just extending Jalen Waddle. We don't know what the future is for Tua on this team. So many question marks on top of even his health concerns from earlier in his career in Kansas City. He's been relatively healthy the last 2 seasons, but at some point, I just think it's going to catch up to him. I mean, we talked about, last season at this point in time, Cooper Kupp was right around the same range. And I just mentioned he's now wide receiver 37 in Dynasty. There's just so much value to be lost with an asset like Tyreek Hill, where I am just not comfortable rostering him in Dynasty as high of a ceiling he has. As To The House says, that Julio Jones cliff drop can just come out of nowhere. And I'm not saying that he's going to jump off a cliff, right? I'm just saying that in Dynasty, values are so fickle. Tyreek Hill could very easily have 1,000 yards, right? No doubt in my mind that Tyreek Hill could have a great season this year, and that's why this is just a Dynasty take. But he could also very easily get injured, and we're talking about him being in the wide receiver 30s again. I mean, and even if he has another good year, his value's still probably going to go down because then he's going to be 31 next year. And it's just, this is it, right? You can get wide receiver 1 value for this player right now, and I know it's very hard to move on from a player like Tyreek Hill, but I just think you have to do it. I really, really do, especially, him being a little bit undersized and one of those more speedy players. That's just the exact type of stuff that catches up to you. So I'm moving off of him as much as it pains me. But, I'll be taking some Cooper Kupp, guys. Tyreek Hill is overpriced right now in Dynasty, but Cooper Kupp is underpriced right now in redraft, actually. We talk about, these players, like Tyreek Hill has a redraft wide receiver 3 price tag, right? Davante Adams, he's going in the second round. A lot of the wide receivers I mentioned, sans DeAndre Hopkins, Davante Adams, Stephon Diggs, Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, all of those wide receivers I just mentioned go before Cooper Kupp in redraft, but they're valued around the same in Dynasty or even cheaper. And so I don't really understand it. I especially don't understand why Cooper Kupp has an underdog ADP of wide receiver 23 right now, because that's what he was last year. Last year, he was wide receiver 23 on a points per game basis, despite missing 4 games, despite clearly being less than 100%. And if you look at the games that both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua played, Cooper Kupp had 4 games with 10 or more targets. Puka Nacua had 3. So Cooper Kupp actually was more highly sought after in this offense when both were out there. Kupp also last year, believe it or not, had 3 top 5 weekly finishes. He had the ceiling last year. So why a guy who was wide receiver 23 on a points per game basis in a down year is he being drafted as the wide receiver 23? That's his floor. Cooper Kupp could very easily be a top 10 wide receiver again. The Rams, Matthew Stafford, they all clearly still rely on him. I mean, despite missing his games last year, he was still 9th in red zone targets, just total red zone targets. He was 15th in slot snaps, missing 4 games, yet the volume was still there. This is a player that is a very, very good wide receiver. One of the best seasons, if not the best wide receiver season we've ever seen, just came from him a couple seasons ago. He's healthier now, a full offseason. The Rams have slightly upgraded their offensive line. They're even upgrading the running game, giving Kyren Williams some help. Matthew Stafford, another year removed from his injury. Sean McVay, even another year just under his belt as a head coach. I mean, this Rams team looks better than they did last year, better than they did a couple seasons ago, and are primed for a really, really good season in a shootout division. Cooper Kupp being healthy, Cooper Kupp another year under his belt. Puka Nacua breaking out might even help Cooper Kupp be covered slightly less, but either way, wide receiver 23 price tag for the season. Easy button to press, especially in our PPR leagues. I genuinely, I've said this a lot on the show, I genuinely would not be surprised if Cooper Kupp outperformed Puka Nacua this year. And that means nothing against Puka Nacua. Nothing at all against Puka Nacua. It's just that is how good Cooper Kupp is. We talked about it last week. Puka Nacua is going to Cooper Kupp for training, right? Like Cooper Kupp is the main guy here. Puka Nacua is just the apprentice. Cooper Kupp's the master, and he'll probably still be the master for the next 2 years on his contract. Puka Nacua is still very great season expected as well. I think both could be top 15, but either way, wide receiver 23 for Cooper Kupp. Easy button to press for me. Undervalued and mispriced right now on Underdog. Which will go ahead. Actually, before we move on, Fantasy Plumber says this Rams offense could be top 5, and I don't disagree. Again, they upgraded their offensive line. Matthew Stafford, another year removed from his injury. Cooper Kupp, healthy. Blake Corum. They brought in these 2 tight ends. You guys know I like Colby Parkinson for some reason, right? So I really am all in on this Rams offense. And what I don't understand, right? Something isn't adding up. Something is not adding up. This is the easiest thing. So guys, this is a really good tidbit. Focus. Listen, tune in, get ready. So basically, my favorite thing to do in fantasy football is what I call completing the circle. Basically, if you notice that, it's very easy to find ADP discrepancies when it comes to an offense, and the Rams are a perfect example. They were a perfect example last year, for example. Last year, we talked about it. Cooper Kupp was going in the first or second round, right? But Matthew Stafford was being taken at the end. Puka Nacua taken at the end. Kyren Williams taken at the end. So how were we last year like, oh, Cooper Kupp's going to have a really good season and no one else? And then we saw, oh, Matthew Stafford had a really good season. Cooper Kupp had a really good season. Puka Nacua had a really good season. Kyren Williams had a really good season. We can do the same thing this year. Puka Nacua being drafted in the first round. Kyren Williams being drafted in the second round. Cooper Kupp being drafted in the third, fourth, fifth round, right? But Matthew Stafford being taken at the end. Tutu Atwell being taken at the end. Blake Corum being taken towards the end. There's still so much value to be had. And we tell it, right? We all believe that Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kyren Williams can have good seasons. But why can't we believe it for Matthew Stafford? It makes no sense to me. Continue. Scrap Iron says you cannot buy everyone. There has to be some players that you completely pass on and don't like, regardless of ADP. That's 100% Scrap Iron. I mean, it sounds like you tuned in late as I was just talking about selling Tyreek Hill and how I'm moving on from him. I've been talking this whole offseason about a ton of players that I'm passing on. Like I have 0% exposure of Garrett Wilson, for example. I'm taking a huge stand on Marvin Harrison Jr. over even Puka Nacua. Like I've made some stands here. So don't tell me that I'm buying everyone. That is just not the case. I'm simply just buying Cooper Kupp right now. My next mispriced player, and to Scrap Iron's point, is Caleb Williams, who I am completely out on this season, not only in seasonal, but in Dynasty. I do not understand Caleb Williams' price tag at all. He is valued as if he's already played football, and I don't get it. He's right now the Dynasty quarterback 8. The underdog QB 12. And again, with the same argument of Tyreek Hill, if you look at his peers, there's a big discrepancy here. Jaden Daniels, Dynasty QB 12. JJ McCarthy, Dynasty QB 19. Drake May, Dynasty QB 18. Bo Nix, Dynasty quarterback 23. And in fact, Jaden Daniels is actually valued ahead of Caleb Williams in redraft. So what are we doing here? Why are we valuing Caleb Williams so highly right now when he hasn't played a snap of football? In fact, we already know that Matt Eberflus is not that good of a head coach. We know that Shane Waldron is not that good of an offensive coordinator. And we know that Caleb Williams actually struggled last year at USC against some of the top opponents. So why are we doing this? Why are we valuing Caleb Williams around the same range as an Anthony Richardson, a Joe Burrow, a Kyler Murray? Why are we valuing him higher than a Justin Herbert, a Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, players that have actually shown us successful seasons, right? I don't get it. I don't get it. If I had Caleb Williams, which I don't, I have 0 Caleb Williams, I would be trading him. everywhere I can. I would be getting Jordan Love plus, Kyler Murray plus, Joe Burrow plus, Justin Herbert plus, Trevor Lawrence plus, right? I would just be going down the list. I would get, if I want a rookie quarterback, I would get any of these rookie quarterbacks plus. I don't understand the price tag right now. He's horribly mispriced, not just in Dynasty, but in redraft as well. We've got to let the dude play football first. We don't know what's going to happen here. I know that we're projecting a good season, but who knows, right? Keenan Allen could get injured. Right? DJ Moore could struggle. Right? DeAndre Swift could struggle. Like, there are so many things here, and yet Caleb Williams is being priced as if he's just had a 4,000-yard, 30 passing touchdown season, and that might just not happen. There's a reason it hasn't happened in Chicago before. It's not just because they haven't had talent at quarterback, because they have. It's a weather thing. It's a team thing. It's a whole lot of different factors that play into it, and I am not comfortable taking Caleb Williams at his price tag right now. I am selling and really all out avoiding in seasonal right now. As there's better options. There's better options. Just get Jaden Daniels. He actually has some mobile wheels, and a little bit better of an offense too. I think at least a little bit more of a fantasy-friendly offense when I look at it. So that'll lead us to our next player that is horribly mispriced, and this is going to be Tony Pollard, who right now is underpriced not only in seasonal, but in Dynasty as well. This is a player that is right now the Dynasty running back 32 on Keep Trade Cut, the RB 29 on Underdog? What? What are we doing? I like Tyjae Spears. I do. I think he's fine. But guys, like, Tony Pollard was like everyone's favorite running back in fantasy football just a year ago. He had an RB8 finish in PPR leagues and had risen all the way to Dynasty RB5 on Keep Trade Cut heading into last season. And a lot of that came because he was hyper efficient and extremely elusive running back that could handle the load in Dallas. And we saw it. We saw it. And yet, for some reason, we're like fading him because last year he was recovering from a high ankle sprain and fractured fibula that he suffered at the end of the season before. But he still finished last year as the RB12 and had over 1,000 rush yards and some receiving yards to boot. He's now fully healthy. He has a new contract with the Tennessee Titans and still showed some efficiency towards the end of the season last year, especially from weeks 11 onward when he finally had his health, as he put it himself, 18 points, 22 points, 17 points, 16 points. I mean, I don't get it. I really don't get it. Tony Pollard, again, finished last year as the RB12, less than 100%, and is valued as the RB29. RB32 in Dynasty. And I know that Tyjae Spears is going to get some work, but there's one thing that we should talk about here, and that's the fact that the new regime brought in Tony Pollard. Tyjae Spears was on the roster. They could have studied the film and seen everything that Tyjae Spears did last year, as efficient as he was. But they still brought in Tony Pollard. They want at least Tony Pollard to probably be the starting running back here. Both can get a ton of volume, but Tony Pollard is a hyper-efficient running back that we've seen before. He's a little bit more of the true bell cow profile than a Tyjae Spears does, and can do a little bit more between the tackles than a Tyjae Spears can. Tony Pollard is a running back that we need to be drafting right now. I do not get it. I really don't. We're fading him because he was less than 100% last year, but even at less than 100%, he finished with over 1,000 yards and was healthy for most of the season. I do not understand why Tony Pollard is valued how he is right now. Get him in Dynasty, get him in redraft, thank me later. And no, I'm not saying fade Tyjae Spears. You can get him too. But I do believe that Tony Pollard is the RB1 on this team. I think he'll at least get 60% of the opportunities, probably closer to 65%, with Tyjae Spears getting some receiving work. But I think Tony Pollard's going to be the featured back on first and second down, and he'll probably get a lot of third down work as well. This is a running back that they paid a decent amount of money for. The new regime totally brought in. This is a running back that was a bell cow in Dallas. This is a running back that's been hyper efficient in his career with great athleticism. Tony Pollard, a true value right now. Let's hop into the comments as I see some. We'll come back. Mistakes were made with Pollard last year. I do agree. I will say I was selling Pollard last year. I really was. So I don't necessarily think that he has, the whole top 5 Dynasty range in his range of outcomes again. But I mean, I think he could easily hop back into the top 20 easily. So yeah, I want Tony Pollard again. I'll take the chance. I think that his value is now appropriate easily. Dakota says both Spears and Pollard can outperform their ADP. I agree. I just think Pollard is a little bit more mispriced. So there we go. The next final one is TJ Hockenson. This one's confusing to me too. This one's really confusing to me. I think if TJ Hockenson wasn't a tight end, I would agree with a lot of you in fading TJ Hockenson. But this is a fickle position. And I don't care that TJ Hockenson is less than 100%. I will take TJ Hockenson in the 15th round, right? The 14th round. And, I'll just let him sit on my IR until he's healthy. And then he'll be healthy. And I can have a Jelani Woods, a Tyler Conklin, a Hunter Henry hold down the fort while I wait on an elite option to return to me. I don't get it. I know that Kirk Cousins is gone, but this is still a high pass volume Vikings offense. And this is still an offense that when he returns, he's going to be a featured part of it. TJ Hockenson last year was on pace to finish as the overall tight end one in both standard and PPR leagues. I mean, what do we want from him? I know he suffered an injury late. He'll probably land on PUP and miss the first few games of the season, but he'll be there when it matters most. And last year, Hockenson got so much opportunity. He was top 3 amongst tight ends in points per game, receptions, targets, target share, air yards, even unrealized air yards. He left some on the table. It really makes no sense to me. It's mind-boggling, really, that you can get a player with this kind of production and potential volume in the 13th round on Underdog right now. Tight end 16 on Underdog. His dynasty value hasn't changed. He's still dynasty tight end 6 because we all know that he's an elite tight end and you can get him at a massive discount right now. Again, if he was a wide receiver, whatever. I don't really want to waste the roster spot on a wide receiver I might have to wait half the season for. But a tight end? A tight end. All I'm saying is you can literally get top 5 production from the tight end 16 when he's healthy. You can waste an IR spot. It's not a big deal. You can waste a bench spot. I really don't care. Because what's better? Literally, what's better? Getting Cole Kmet and Dalton Schultz? Or TJ Hockenson and Jelani Woods? I mean, come on, guys. Let's have some fun here. Let's shoot for the moon. And, figure out, just be in tight end wasteland while you wait on TJ Hockenson. But then when he's back, you're going to be so happy he's back. He's going to be scoring you 10 to 20 points a week. Right? I don't get it. I mean, I kind of get it. Again, if he was a wide receiver or a quarterback, something a little bit more replaceable of a position, then I would understand fading a guy because he's recovering from an injury. But this is the tight end position we're talking about, and this is TJ Hockenson we're talking about. And even the JJ McCarthy argument. You can say, oh, well, it's a rookie quarterback that we don't think is going to be that good. Okay, sure. Rookie quarterbacks generally lock on to their tight end, right? It's a big safety net type of player for this offense. So I just want TJ Hockenson. I actually have 75, 80% exposure to him in Underdog right now because I just don't care about the first few weeks of the season. I'll make it work. And even then, it works really well, in my opinion, if I get Kyle Pitts early and then just have TJ Hockenson as my second tight end for if Kyle Pitts just doesn't pan out and gets hurt, I have 2 elite options. Or I also don't really hate taking TJ Hockenson as your first tight end and going with a 3 tight end build and just, hoping a Tyler Conklin or a Jelani Woods or a Colby Parkinson or whoever can hold down the fort alternating weeks before TJ Hockenson returns. But again, this is the tight end position we're talking about, and this is an elite tight end we're talking about, and you can get him for tight end 16 price tags at the end of your fantasy football drafts. You can't get that type of upside very often. Normally, that's not the case. Even when a player's suspended, we saw Alvin Kamara, he was going earlier at drafts last year. Cooper Kupp, he was going earlier in drafts last year. Jamison Williams was going around the same range last year. DeAndre Hopkins was going earlier when he was suspended a couple seasons ago. But for some reason with TJ Hockenson, we're fading him. So I want him right now while he's still incredibly, incredibly cheap in these redraft drafts. So those are my horribly mispriced players that I'm either buying or selling in Dynasty or Redraft or Underdog or whatever. So yeah, thanks guys for tuning into that. Let's go ahead and check the chat for some extra questions. In Dynasty, would I rather have Michael Pittman and Jamison Williams or Olave? And this is probably a hot take for me, but I would rather take these swings on Michael Pittman and Jamison Williams. Basically, what I'll say here is in any given season, I don't necessarily believe that Olave is that much better than Michael Pittman. Both of them are wide receiver ones on offenses, right? And some high-powered offenses, at least on the Colts side, even they kind of balance each other out. The Saints might be a little bit more pass-heavy, but the Colts offense is a little bit better. So I think that evens it out. And then you get the really fun upside swing in Jamison Williams. I will take that side of the trade. Again, my take on Chris Olave is that he's shown us who he is, and that's not bad. In fact, he's shown us he's a really good wide receiver. He's a consistent 1,000 yards receiver, But I don't think that Chris Olave is ever going to give that like 1,500-yard season. And I think that you could get, Michael Pittman, very similar production, and take a very fun upside swing on Jameson Williams, one of my guys, a guy I like a lot. So I would take that move if you can. And maybe see if you have Chris Olave, maybe see if they could tack on like an extra third or something. I think you could squeeze out a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Jamie says, you cannot buy Ryan Flournoy. Cannot forget. You got to buy Ryan Flournoy. The Fantasy Plumber says it's hard not to be out on the entire Bears offense. Even if Caleb breaks every Bears QB record and puts up 3,030, the wide receivers will be massive disappointments. Yeah, I have not had an easy time drafting DJ Moore. I have had a very easy time taking Rome Odunze just because, at that point in the draft, we're drafting for upside. Let's face it. And Rome Odunze, being a top 10 wide receiver with the type of college production and combine performance we saw from him, has a really, really high ceiling. I know that an injury might have to fall his way, but I'm also starting to believe that Rome Odunze could kind of be the DK Metcalf or like Tyler Lockett, whereas like a Keenan Allen would be the JSN in this offense. So that's kind of where my head's at right now. I think Rome Odunze is a little bit of a value, but I do kind of agree the rest of them, it's a little hard to press that button. Let's see. Can we say the same for MHJ as you're saying for Caleb Williams? Yes and no. Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't being valued over some studs right now. Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't again, Caleb Williams, top 8, right? Like Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't that high yet. Like you still have, of course, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Puka Nacua generally going before him. Maybe not Olave, but either way, all of those receivers are honestly think that I am fine taking Marvin Harrison Jr. over. Like I would want, these are my rankings. Get mad at me if you want, whatever. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, this is a guy that is slotting into the number 1 wide receiver role on a very high volume and efficient offense in the Arizona Cardinals. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is a lock for a ton of targets this year. And I know that we could say the same, but the upside case for Caleb Williams isn't necessarily Marvin Harrison Jr. is slightly undervalued and can be the dynasty wide receiver 1. Like that's possible. With Caleb Williams, I don't see him ever going into that top 5 tier. Like I even if he had, I don't see it happening. I don't see him having a CJ Stroud type rookie season. And even a CJ Stroud type rookie season didn't make him the dynasty quarterback 1 for anyone other than me. So I don't see much value going Caleb Williams' way, whereas I still see Marvin Harrison Jr. having some room to grow. And like the wide receivers that he's in front of, like a Chris Olave, a Drake London, a Jalen Waddle, those players have a little bit more wide receiver competition and also don't have the true alpha ceiling that Marvin Harrison Jr. has. So it's a yes and a no, but I just think that Marvin Harrison Jr. has a lot more room to grow than a Caleb Williams does in terms of his value. See, exactly. Dylan traded Caleb Williams for Kyler and Worthy. That's incredible. Like, that's just like, Kyler Murray is probably going to outscore Caleb Williams, and then you just got the Chiefs rookie wide receiver for free, essentially. So that's what I'm talking about here. It's just, I don't get it. I don't get why you would be holding on to Caleb Williams right now at all, to be honest. You can get just so much. Sanders, still worth rostering in Dynasty. I'm going to assume this is Miles Sanders. Yes, in deep leagues. I mean, yes, as much as it sucks. I mean, Jonathan Brooks, obviously he's coming off an ACL tear, so there's no guarantee that he stays healthy. And I mean, Chuba Hubbard, he's also awesome, but running backs, they get hurt. So I would say an RB3, unfortunately, is worth rostering just because it's not 100%. I mean, it's like, just drop him. You know what? Screw it. Just drop him. Pick him up again if he becomes relevant. You can have more upside swings. Just drop him. Chuka says that Hawk had a major injury and still needs to get into football shape after he gets back. He isn't Superman. Hawk will be a huge disappointment if drafted. What do we expect from Hawk, seriously? I expect him to be a top 5 tight end from weeks 10 onward. That's what I'm expecting from him. As Tyler says, he's a second half play, especially a championship week play. I really do think that Hockenson is going to be really good when he returns, at least when he becomes healthy again. Let's see. Jaden Reed in a 25 third for 25 first. Yeah, give me the first. Give me the first. I do like Jaden Reed, and it is close, but I think that I would like to re-roll there. You're going to gain some value. Obviously, Jaden Reed wasn't a first-round pick, but also I do believe in Christian Watson. I think Romeo Doubs is still going to be there, right? Like so I don't know if Jaden Reed is ever actually going to get that alpha usage. I still think he's obviously going to be a very, very good fantasy football asset and a very, very good producer. But I think there's a little bit more of an upside case here with that first-round pick. You can clear the roster spot, so I think I would do it. Will you guys be running the head-to-head tournament again this year? I actually don't know. I will look into that. I'll probably have to ask next week as our directors meetings are on Thursdays, and tomorrow being 4th of July, we canceled it. But we'll next week we'll have it, and I'll see. I think so, but I'll have to double check. But yes, Fantasy Plumber is right. Reed's production is easily replaced. So many wide receivers, and yes, Marvin Harrison Jr. at the top of round 2 tier, which is just fine. Yes, he could underperform there, but I think more than likely that's accurately valued just because there's not really that much target competition. Marvin Harrison Jr. I really like. I would not be surprised if he finished as a wide receiver 1. I don't think he will. I think he's going to be more like 5, like I said earlier. But that's how he can get so many targets and he can be so good. So I just there's absolutely no world where I'm fading him, and I am taking some stances on him, taking him even in the first round in some underdog drafts just for team build and stuff like that. So anyway, that is today's show. Great question, guys. That added an extra 10 minutes. Always nice to get some time talking with you guys. You guys are an incredible audience. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope to see you all tomorrow and Friday. We've got some great guests lined up, so make sure you tune into those episodes. And we'll be back live on Monday for breaking down the news or whatever else happens over the weekend. Hopefully we get some Brandon Ayuk updates. As they said, they would reassess after the 4th of July. So we'll find out. But either way, guys, thanks again for tuning in. You all have a wonderful Wednesday, a fantastic rest of your week. Enjoy 4th of July weekend. Have a good one. Peace.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.